There are people on YouTube, for example, that have a larger audience than daytime CNN, and they are extremely radical in pushing people.
I've come to talk with you again because a vision softly creeping lifted seeds while I was sleeping, and the vision.
These companies have freedom of speech, but I'm not sure we need Verizon, AT&T, Comcast, and such to be bringing them into tens of millions of homes.
Within the sound of silence.
What's going on, everyone? Jeremy here from The Quartering, and it's already begun. The mainstream media is back at it now, openly, and I'll show you some video clips which are hilarious, openly demanding the deplatforming of content creators, specifically here on YouTube. Now, they refer to them as quote-unquote conservative commentators, which many people lump me in, even though I don't consider myself conservative at all. I'm very progressive in just about every single human rights issue. I'm a big tree hugger, pro-environment, pro-gay rights, pro-gay marriage. Somehow I get called far right. And that's the problem. When you have CNN openly calling for deplatforming of a particular political foe, that's concerning, especially because people that are lumped into that group, aren't even sure how they got there for the most part. Essentially, there's two groups on YouTube. There is the mainstream narrative. And by the way, those channels are dead. All right. There's a reason that like the Young Turks can't muster 5,000 people on a live stream. All right. Those channels are dead. The real channels that are flourishing are just regular people with normal takes, I would argue. But the media props up the kind of the extreme takes and then lumps everybody in. And then that's who gets banned. That's who gets wiped out of Twitter. And now we see this ridiculous segment on CNN where they're outright calling for the deplatforming of YouTubers. And in their words, conservative YouTubers, which is bad. I mean, it's obviously bad that you would target anybody based on their belief system. But also, I don't care if they were targeting liberals. This isn't okay. All right? Ultimately, what this is fear-mongering, the veil of fear-monger. We need to deplatform these people because they're spreading misinformation. But what CNN really wants is no competition. CNN is afraid of YouTubers. YouTubers are more respected than the most popular anchor at CNN. YouTubers are nimble navigators. They can cover news just as quickly as CNN can, better, and with literally no overhead. My entire set costs less than $1,000 to create. If I include my computer and all the AV equipment, less than $10,000. CNN is a multi-million-dollar behemoth, a giant Titanic ship in a small dock that takes forever to change directions. Meanwhile, YouTubers are zip-zooming around them, covering things better, faster, and more reliably. CNN is afraid. And then they march this idiot out there, former Facebook executive, had this to say.
In the United States Congress. But there is over half of the Republicans, and there will be a continual political pressure on the companies to not take it seriously. So I think first you have to focus on those violent extremists, and those companies have to be brave in that way. And second, we have to turn down the capability of these conservative influencers.
Right there. We have to turn down the capability of conservative influencers. And look at these two rats. They look like they're just waiting for their little feed pellet to come down.
to reach these huge audiences. There are people on YouTube, for example, that have a larger audience than daytime CNN.
I don't think that was quite the supporting fact these two weasels wanted. They got owned. I have a larger viewership than CNN. That's really what this is about. If you look at some of the comments, if other platforms and people on YouTube attract bigger audiences, then clearly people prefer them over the mainstream media networks. The democratic process of choice.
And they are extremely radical and pushing extremely radical views. And so it's up to the Facebooks and YouTubes in particular to think about whether or not they want to be effectively cable networks for disinformation. And then we're going
to... This dude... Who? Now, are there some people on YouTube with some very questionable opinions? Of course. They also exist on Twitter. They also exist on Facebook. And guess what? They exist on CNN. Okay? They exist everywhere. The reason they're pointing out YouTube is because they're a competitor. They're talking about OANN and Newsmax, which are conservative news outlets that popped up quicker by utilizing social media. They want to get rid of them, not because they're really worried about the information that they're spreading, because let's be honest, CNN spreads plenty of fake news as well. They all do, by the way. Fox News included. It's not about stopping misinformation. It's about squashing competition. The same way all of these losers locked arms and painted Parler as a den of the most evil people on the planet. Yeah, there were bad people on Parler. But again, they exist on Facebook. They exist on Twitter. They exist on every social network in every aspect of IRL life. It's about getting rid of competition. You can see one article written about this on the entirety of the internet, written by somebody whose name I can't even pronounce, but I appreciate it. Former Facebook executive urges big tech media giants to censor conservative content. A former executive with Facebook is proudly advocating for television services providers and social media platforms to do what is necessary to suppress conservative content, citing outlets like OANN and Newsmax. Alex Stamos, former chief security officer for Facebook, made the stunning suggestion during his appearance on Sunday's Reliable Sources with host Brian Ratface Stelter, in my opinion. He told Stelter telecommunications providers like AT&T, Comcast, and Verizon should remove conservative outlets from their networks. Allowing Americans to access such spaces, Stamos reasoned, had given people freedom to follow the reporters, commentators, and outlets they like most. The crux of Stamos' argument is that some actors are taking advantage of constitutional protection of free speech and as a result need to be held back by gatekeepers, such as YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and media service providers. Quote, I think that gets to a really core issue with our freedoms as Americans and the way we have treated press freedom in the past. It is being abused by these actors in a way that we have given a lot of leeway, both in traditional media and on social media, to people who have very broad range of political views. It is now in the great economic interest of individuals to become more and more extreme. Right. Look what has happened to CNN. Stamos rightly pointed out the magnetic pull towards existing solely within our chosen echo chambers. However, he failed to acknowledge the same thing is happening on the left. Quote, we have to figure out the OANN and Newsmax problem and that these companies have freedom of speech, but I'm not sure we need Verizon, AT&T, Comcast, and such to be bringing them into tens of millions of homes. So quite frankly, what he's calling for there is the deplatforming of these channels. Now, again, I don't care if you consider yourself conservative or you consider yourself liberal or libertarian or Wiccan. I don't care. I appreciate that you watch my videos. And I hope you know that I accept you. Because you're allowed, by the way, to embrace whatever ideas that you want. It's not my job to judge you for that. But what we have here is big tech going after, under the guise of safety, their competition. It's the exact same garbage we saw with the Patriot Act. Americans, don't you want to feel safe at night? You know, we failed in protecting you. But you know what would help us protect you more? If you gave up more of your rights. That's what they did to us in 2001. If you weren't around to remember that or you weren't paying attention, that's how they pitched it. Hey, we failed to stop it, but just give us more of your rights. Give up more of your rights, and that'll fix the problem. Living in an echo chamber is something most people are drawn to by the nature of humanity. And you have to literally force yourself out of that to challenge your own ideas. It's the reason I follow people that I disagree with. It's the reason I engage in, some may say arguments, but interactions with people who I will consider myself, you know, the opposite of their belief system. Because you have to understand the way that others think to find any kind of common ground. See, this is difficult on social media because social media literally awards, you know, ponage culture. But in real life, if you want to have relationships, you're going to have friends that are the opposite political spectrum, and it's fine. It works. You see here, then Monday Morning Joe co-hosts Mika Brzezinski and Joe Scarborough placed quite an outsized amount of blame for everything that happened in the Capitol on Facebook and Twitter. It's like, do these people not understand personal responsibilities? Do you know that ultimately it wasn't Twitter or Parler that made people do terrible things? It was their own decision making. See, mainstream media wants to remove the responsibility of the individual because that makes them easier to control. You grew up this way. You couldn't possibly control this. So now listen to us and we'll fix it for you. The people that did things that crossed the line at the Capitol, people that did things all summer long, yeah, they all use Twitter or Facebook or YouTube or something, but these platforms were not responsible for their actions. The only person responsible for their actions was them alone. And the longer you continue to coddle these children and say it isn't their fault and that there's no consequences for your own decisions, that you couldn't possibly have prevented it. You went down the rabbit hole, the alt-right rabbit hole on YouTube. You couldn't have prevented it. It's not your fault. That's not helping them. It's hurting them. I hope you enjoyed this video. We'll talk to you again real soon.